Hello and welcome to the Crimson Misery podcast. My name is Will Rainbolt. It is December 2nd, 2024. If you live in the US, I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving week, Thanksgiving with your family and friends. Um i- I certainly did, and so hope the same for you. A bit of housekeeping first. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcast, consider giving the show 5 stars, consider giving a follow. And if you're watching on YouTube, consider liking the video, consider subscribing, and let's get right into it because we have so much to talk about. So much to talk about. I was watching a lot of NFL yesterday. I was watching a lot of college football as well because there were a lot of stakes for Indiana. So I tried to get as much college basketball watching as possible. So apologies if I don't get to a particular team or particular game. I'm just going off the biggest headlines and the games that I watched, and a little bit of analysis as well for Indiana basketball for mostly worse. But with that said, yeah, it's been a week. It has been a week of sports. It has been a week of food. It has been a week of a food coma. So anyway, it's let's just I guess go chronologically here. Or well, do I want to go chronologically or do I want to do sport by sport? Um, I'll go. Let's just briefly touch on some football action really quickly. Indiana defeated arch rival Purdue 66-0. They are 11-1. They have a currently, according to the ESPN Projector Index, a 99.1% chance to make the college football playoff. I'm fairly confident they'll get in. They need a lot to go wrong this next week in order to be even considered going out. So I think they're good, but it's not 100%. It's close, but not quite. So anything is theoretically possible, but I'm very proud of this team regardless. 11-1 is beyond where I thought this team would be going. So again, give Kurt Signetti a $1 gajillion contract extension. Build the statue, you cowards. Um, but no, anyway, it's just been amazing, and it's been a really fun ride. Aside from the Ohio State game last week, it's been beyond where I thought possible. And Kurt Signetti and all the transfers and all the coaches that he brought in are all played a gigantic role, and even some of the returning guys like Mike Kadich, the center, Taven Jackson stepping up for Curtis Rourke. I mean, those guys deserve equally as much praise, and I'm not sure, but again, 66 nothing over Purdue, and I'm not sure who posted this first, so because I want to give credit, um, but at one point, defensive tackle James Carpenter for Indiana had more rushing yards than the entire Purdue offense defensive lineman. No, yeah, okay, yeah, defensive lineman. He had more rushing yards than Purdue at one point, and then Indiana also had more points scored than Purdue had yards offensively. So, if you want to know how dominant of a game this was for Indiana, start by going to that. So, um, yeah, just an overall dominating performance, and I'm so and I cannot wait to see what comes. Was kind of hoping to get Penn State would lose, they would get the college football, the Big Ten championship game, but since Ohio State lost, um, Michigan beating them, and then the fight that happened. Um, Credit, I mean, I hate Michigan with a passion, but like Screw you, Ohio State. You deserved that loss after the trash talking you all did last week. But yeah, then the fight happens. Michigan tries to plant the flag at the horseshoe, and Ohio State took exception to that. And then the police got involved, started macing the players. Both schools were fined $100,000, and I mean that was just an ugly scene. I'm not the biggest fan of planting the flag at an opponent's field. I wouldn't really like it if Indiana did that at some point. Um, but I mean, for teams that are like going after them and fighting, I really, I really, again, as one of the Michigan players said, they do not handle losing well, and you could tell it was an ugly scene. So anyway, gonna be looking forward to conference championship week, and we'll see what ends up happening. But again, I'm pretty certain that Indiana's gonna be in, but again, you never know. So, if that being said, let's go. Yeah, well, now let's go chronologically for college basketball. Um, it's been a week, and there were a couple of gigantic tournaments in there. Firstly, with the Maui Invitational, I believe I predicted Auburn to win, and they ended up winning. So I, that was a good call on my part. I wanted the chaos, is what I said, and um, but what I did not expect happening and what I did not predict was that Memphis would be upsetting UConn. Not only that, UConn lost all three games in the Maui. I will get to them more in detail in a moment, but Solo Ball did have a clutch three-pointer at the end of regulation against Memphis, to tie it and send it to overtime. But then Memphis got hot in overtime, and then were aided by a Dan Hurley technical foul. Um, Again, I will get to Dan Hurley in just a moment, but then you had a great really couple great games. Michigan State, Colorado really wasn't that thrilling. It was what Colorado did the next day that was more exciting. But Auburn had to come back from a gigantic deficit against Iowa State in a top five matchup. Janai Broom had the game winner. And then UNC and Dayton. Dayton had, I believe, a 21-point lead that they ended up blowing. UNC came back to win that. RJ Davis clutch as ever. He was just fantastic. And um, the next day, Auburn ended up beating UNC pretty convincingly, and then Memphis defeats Michigan State to advance to the championship, and then Auburn ends up beating Memphis to win that one. And I got to give a note to Memphis. They upset number two UConn, and then defeat another Power Five team in Michigan State, only to lose to an Auburn team that I think, again, Kansas likely still number one, but I think Auburn has a really, really good case to take that top spot from them. They've played the best so far this year, and I know Kansas's resume. They've beaten both Duke and UNC now, but again, Auburn deserves that number one spot if I had a say in it. Kansas again beat Duke. Hunter Dickinson got ejected in that one, which for those of you who have kept track on Hunter Dickinson may not be that much of a shock. Um, but he ended up pulling a Christian Leitner in against the team that really saw that originally had Christian Leitner and Duke that started it. So um, definitely definitely not a surprise if you know Hunter Dickinson or have seen him play these last 20 years. So um, it's it's just how it is. And Alabama defeated Houston, which I gotta say, it's It was not surprising to see, considering Auburn defeated Houston as well. This was in the Players Era Festival. Uh, and then they turn right back around. They beat Rutgers, but give up 90 points to them. That was a really good game. And then they lose to Oregon in the Players Era Festival Championship. Oregon is 8-0. And I said this in an earlier podcast episode. I'm not sure which one it was, but Oregon, it was my dark horse in the Big Ten, especially to win the Big Ten tournament. And so far, they've played pretty well. They've defeated Texas A&M, they've defeated San Diego State, they defeated Alabama, they've won at Oregon State. So clearly, they're already tested. And this was despite losing N'Faly Dante and Jermaine Cousinard, who were gigantic for them last year in their tournament run. And you have guys like TJ Bamba who transferred in from Villanova, and you also have guys like Kwame Evans, Keyshawn Bartholomew, Nathan Biddle. You have guys that can clearly lead the team, and I again, my prediction was Oregon would somehow find a way to win the Big Ten tournament, and that's what I'm going to stick to. It might be Purdue, it could be Rutgers, it could be Wisconsin, it could be Illinois, who looked really good against Arkansas. But again, it's John Calipari's the head coach of Arkansas. That isn't a surprise. That was a really it was a really interesting game for Illinois and Arkansas because you had the Ivisic twins, Tomislav and uh, what's his brother's name? Zvonimir. Yeah, he played at Kentucky last year. Why did I forget that? But I mean, again, guys like Jonas Adu transferred from Tennessee, Boogie Flanda, the freshman phenom, Janelle Davis from Florida Atlantic, Carter Knox, DJ Wagner, Adu Thero, and they laid an egg against Illinois. They were down by like double digits the entire second half, and it just a case of Calipari getting outcoached yet again. And it's like how Kentucky has been these past five or so seasons, where you look at the Kentucky now under Mark Pope, and it just looks so much more fluid. I'll touch more on Kentucky in a second. Wisconsin's 8-0 in the Big Ten, but let's get to the battle for Atlantis. Unfortunately, um, so Oklahoma ends up winning the battle for Atlantis. Congratulations to them. At least it wasn't Louisville, but again, Louisville ended up beating um, Indiana. So where do I even begin? So they got destroyed. Indiana just got manhandled by a uh, I don't want to even say like a team that they on paper should have beaten, but just like they knew what they needed to clean up from especially the UNC Greensboro game. Um, and they end up losing 89-61 against Louisville in Pat Kelsey's first year as head coach. The curse of Chucky Hepburn has apparently come back, transfer from Wisconsin to Louisville, and then when that happens, I just knew that Gonzaga was going to win their game because West Virginia ended up upsetting Gonzaga. Louisville ends up beating West Virginia, but then ends up falling to Oklahoma, and Gonzaga ends up winning 89-73. So at least Indiana was plus 12 in the points department, but they still gave up 89 points. And then Indiana themselves score 89 points and give up 73 to Providence in a win. So at least Indiana did get a win in a uh, neutral court tournament, unlike another team. But it's watching those games, and even in the Providence game, there were plenty of defensive lapses that should not have been the case. There has also been a lack of defensive rebounding, which has been a concern when you are playing two bigs who primarily aren't the greatest outside shooters or I mean Malik Renew can shoot a little bit, but especially with Umar Ballo, you would think that there would be more of an emphasis on rebounding, both offensive and defensive, especially defensive rebounding. But that isn't the case. And then on offense, when you are playing two bigs, as Mike Woodson is doing, you would think that, especially because they're not the best shooters, you would think that they're better at playing inside and scoring inside, and that just isn't the case. Teams have figured that out, but Mike Woodson can't adjust. It's like he's unable to see that, like, oh, teams have figured out that we're going to pass the ball inside into the post and make have guys make a one-on-one inside. Wow, maybe we should I don't know, make the offense so it's a little more perimeter oriented with guards that you got from the transfer portal, like Miles Rice, like Cannon Carlisle, got shooters like Luke Goody. Um, wow, maybe you should try doing that. And he doesn't. And what Mike Woodson said at the end of the believe it was the end of the Gonzaga game, or was it the end of the Louisville game, where he said something to the effect of, "We're still, we still need to get to the point where we're beating the Louisvilles and the Gonzagas." And Mike, buddy, it's it's year four. You're in year four of your head coaching tenure at Indiana University. Teams clearly, especially with NIL, especially with the transfer portal, they are building teams much more swiftly and are generating much more success than you are. You look at Alabama; they got a one seed with Brandon Miller and end up falling in the Sweet 16, but then they reload in the transfer portal. Obviously, they had Mark Sears returning, but they got guys like Grant Nelson, and um, they end up going to the Final Four. They lost to UConn, but they went to the Final Four. They were beating teams. They were being competitive in an increasingly great SEC. So I don't want to hear it. You're looking at Pat Kelsey, who is in year one, who just beat you by 28 points. Illinois had to reload at the transfer portal. They just got a marquee win over Arkansas on a neutral court. Kentucky looks great in the first year, and Mark Pope, and he had to build up that team from scratch. I mean, say what you want about John Calipari, and I have a lot to say, but at least he's doing something with Arkansas. At least they look better than Indiana does. I'm just at a loss. I'm at a loss. Um, and I'm not, and at least Indiana got that win, but even still, if this year goes the way it's going, I don't see how Mike Woodson survives this. And it's the first time where I've really thought to myself that the Fire Mike Woodson crowd has a legitimate point, which I want to give him a fair shake because this is his roster, right? And so when you have your own roster and you have guys that you got from the transfer portal, the only guy remaining from the Archie Miller days is Trey Galloway, um, who may or may not be spending the nights playing blackjack, but I uh, I, I digress. And it's just like I wanted to give that this team a fair shake, and I'm not pulling the plug. But at the same time, you can't be having these results year in and year out in a neutral court. Even when they were with Trace Jackson Davis, even in his legendary senior year for Indiana, they still lost to Arizona on a neutral court. They lost to Kansas on the road. They lost to Miami in the round of 32. They lost by like 16 points. So when are we supposed to be expecting as Indiana fans to have Indiana start winning these matchups on the road or on a neutral court in the non-conference season? When are we supposed to be expecting that? I know he got the win against Purdue, on the road in that same year. But mm, come on, we can't keep doing this year in and year out. It just keeps going back to the Archie Miller days and the late Tom Crean days too, because but at least that last Tom Crean year, at least they beat Kansas on a neutral court. I'm not sure how they did with how that season ended up turning out, but um, yeah. That so all that to say, congratulations to Oklahoma um, for winning the Battle for Atlantis, and then wanted to give my winners, the big winners. Oklahoma, I already mentioned. Auburn, I already mentioned. Um, Michigan won the Fort Myers tip-off against Xavier, and sorry, I had to confirm that who it was who they played, and it was 78 to 53. So it was a convincing win. So see another team in a first-year head coach in Dusty May, who's already getting a big win early on. They defeated Virginia Tech, and then they defeated Xavier to win that. Florida, even with the Todd Golden stuff going on, they defeated Wichita State and then Wake Forest. I predicted Minnesota would beat Wichita State in the ESPN Events Invitational. But the shot to win the game, I believe, just went off. So did not end up happening. And it's, yeah, I mean, Florida's, again, they're really good. And but again, with all of the accusations, it's hard for me to really be excited for Florida, and so uh, that's just kind of where my head is, and um, can't really can't really say much else there. But I'll also, even though they didn't end up winning the Maui, I still got to give Memphis a lot of props. Again, beating UConn, beating Michigan State, losing to Auburn is no shame in doing that in a team that is right now like looks like the best team in college basketball. Um, so I gotta give them their props, man. They just look so much better, even when they were good last year. There were cracks even before they were like number 10 in the country, and then they ended up falling apart after that. Caleb Mills, David Jones, Javon Quinterly, all were like big parts in that. But at the same time, they were just not looking all that good. And now Penny Hardaway has reloaded from the transfer portal. I mean, he got PJ Haggerty from Tulsa, Tyrese Hunter from Texas, Musa Cisse from Ole Miss, Dane Danger from Illinois, Tyreek Smith from SMU, Colby Rogers from Wichita State. He just has so many players that have transferred and put on a pretty good show in Maui. So I mean, with all that, you got to give Memphis props, and that is a team to look out for. They play at Clemson, at Virginia, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, so they've loaded up the schedule pretty well, even outside of the Maui. So keep an eye on Memphis. That's all I'm saying. Keep an eye on Memphis. They're 6-1. East Carolina 7-1. Wichita State 6-1. Um, Wichita State's only loss being to Florida in the ESPN Events Invitational by 37 points to Florida. But even still, I think Wichita State will be fine. This is probably their best team so far post Greg Marshall, at least in the early going. So we'll see if that ends up continuing. So now I would like to switch over um, to the losers, to the teams that get the bronze, silver, and gold medal for being losers. Quote that. Quote that show if you can. I'll give you 3 seconds. All right, it was SpongeBob. All right, so the losers. In third place for the biggest loser award would be Arizona. Um, this Arizona team's just not very good. I mean, the eye test, the teams they've played it are one thing, but the eye test says a completely different thing, and that Arizona just does not look really good. I know they got a pretty good win against Davidson, but losing to Oklahoma and to West Virginia are almost surely to knock them out of the top 25. Um, and um, their record's not 4-2. Get out of here. So someone has not updated this this page I'm on. So why are you telling me something that is clearly incorrect? Well, anyway, they have four losses. They have four losses: Wisconsin, Duke, West Virginia, Oklahoma. That's not good. So they're 3-4. Yeah, they're not 4-2. Come on now. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So yeah, Arizona, a lot of preseason hype, but Wisconsin definitely broke them. Because after that game, they've just played scared. The eye test shows it. They just don't look like a very competent or confident basketball team. So Tommy Lloyd, I mean, there's a chance they could turn it around in Big 12 play, but it's kind of weird to say with Arizona not being in the Pac-12 anymore. But I, this team just doesn't look good. They don't, and just the chemistry isn't there. And so I got to give Arizona the bronze medal for the losers. And the silver has to go to Indiana. I've already touched upon them. I've already said what I've needed to say in that regard. So Indiana, you get the silver medal and the gold medal for losers. You want to take you need a second to think? I've already mentioned them. It's UConn. They are the gold medal winners in Loserville. Loserville. And it makes me very happy to say that. It makes me very happy. Um, Losing to Memphis, as I've already said, Colorado, and then they lose to Dayton. They don't even put up much of a fight against Dayton, mainly because Alex Caravan got hurt. Hope he'll be okay. But the big reason why I put well, two big reasons why I put UConn ahead of Indiana. One, because Indiana at least won a game in the Battle for Atlantis. UConn did not win a single game in the Maui, but also Dan Hurley made an absolute ass of himself. Dude, get therapy. Are you okay? Do you need like Lexapro or something? I got you, man. Wha- What a psycho. You're you're psycho. I mean, it was pretty clear in the past couple years that this is who Dan Hurley was, but a lot of people were kind of, you know, especially UConn fans or just a lot of the pundits in general. I mean, could excuse it because he was, winning two national championships and had UConn playing at a really high level throughout. But apparently, that must go to a lot of coaches' heads. But I mean, again, I don't remember like a coach like Billy Don. I mean, I know Billy Donovan when he won back to back. I know he was always known for stepping out on the court a little bit too much, but he wasn't like a toddler. He wasn't throwing temper tantrums left and right this entire game, this entire 3-game stretch that Dan Hurley was in. It just was ugly, man. And he gets I already mentioned he got a technical against rubbing the officials the wrong way, arguing a call um that a Memphis player went over the back of Liam McNeely. That happened twice this tournament. And that I thought there was a point to that. I thought Kind of a contrary to what Jay Billis was saying on the broadcast, I did think that could have easily been a foul, but the reaction from Dan Hurley was very inappropriate and inexcusable that late in the game. And those two free throws that Memphis ended up making were large in terms of Memphis ending up winning that game. And he didn't get a technical in the Colorado game, but he similarly was acting uh, just like a monster. He was acting like a 5-year-old trapped in a 55-year-old man's body. I'm not sure how old Dan Hurley is. I just saying that as a um, uh, but he man, he's just and people are noticing it a lot more now, especially because UConn is losing and the behavioral problems with Dan Hurley. Um, the people online are, saying, does he have like mental health struggles or is he dealing with something? Like been, I know he's had mental health trouble in the past, which I want to just stress really quickly, I do have a lot of empathy for those people because as someone who has also gone through plenty of mental health struggles in his life, I definitely um, do think that we should be looking at it at a just as a whole, a more sympathetic and empathetic approach to having getting people better and whatever Dan Hurley is dealing with, whether it's personal or emotional or, just something that has always been with him. I hope it gets better, but there's also no excuse to lash out in as a coach like that over and over and over again. He is men's basketball's edition of Kim Mulkey, essentially. And I have no sympathy toward Kim Mulkey, but um yeah, Dan Hurley, biggest lol cow of the week by far, and is just he played a big part um, in having UConn lose 3 games. And I mean, they're still a talented group. I'm not writing off UConn by any means. They still have a lot of talent, even though I'm not entirely sure, you know, what Alex Caravan's status is going to be the rest of the way, especially, with a head injury. You always want to monitor that. But they still have talent with McNeely and Aiden Mahaney, Solo Ball, Samson Johnson. And I just cannot write off UConn at all. Like they could easily turn around and make another Final Four national tournament run, but the way they played this past week, I have a really, really hard time seeing that happening. And again, I just success goes to a lot of people's heads, but this is especially has been the case with Dan Hurley this season. And if he keeps lashing out like this, if he gets like technical foul after technical foul, if he's yelling at the opposing players or coaches or fans, um, then w- then they're going to have more issues, especially if UConn doesn't end up winning a lot of those games. I did see a lot of people on Twitter talking about comparing Bob Knight to Dan Hurley in terms of the behavior that they displayed. And I saw some people saying, like, oh, what Dan Hurley did was way worse than what Bob Knight did. Do you know Bob Knight at all? Have you seen The Last Days of Night? Have you like have you read The Rabbit Hunter? Have you have you read Season on the Brink? Like there are plenty of articles and features and books and films about Bob Knight that clearly like disprove what you're saying. Like Bob Knight was a monster. And that's like non-negotiable. Like yeah, Dan Hurley's throwing temper tantrums, but slow down. Like he's not worse than Bob Knight. And people were saying this. It wasn't just one person, too. Like multiple people were saying this, and they were getting like hundreds of likes. Like people. Stop. Stop. Like, you don't know ball. You don't know ball. You don't know the history of basketball. Speaking of history, this happened Saturday, or was it Saturday or was it Sunday? Um, well, over the weekend, former legendary St. John's head coach Lou Carnesecca passed away at the age of 99. Um, he led the St. John's. At that point, it was was it the Redmen? Is what they were called back when Carnesecca was coaching. Um, why isn't this working? You're gonna have to excuse me here for just a second. Yeah, so he recruited, of course, Chris Mullen to St. John's. Went to the Final Four in 1985. Then when they lost to Georgetown, and then Georgetown ended up losing to Villanova, and one of the greatest upsets in NCAA tournament history. He won two Big East titles in '83 and '86, and what else? What else can you really say? I mean, this legendary St. John's head coach Lou Carnesecca, rest in peace. So, just wanted to point that out for those of you who weren't aware, and if you are aware, then you get it reiterated here. So, with that being said, let's go. Let's do a little bit. Actually, well, let me touch on Purdue really quickly. Purdue men's basketball defeated NC State in a rematch of last year's Final Four, and then Ole Miss gave them a fantastic game. Um, they were leading by about, I believe it was at 7 or 8 in the second half. It were just multiple times where Ole Miss was getting like steal after steal and just running in transition the whole game. Um, and I thought Ole Miss was going to pull off the upset. I mean, it's 23 over 13, so it's not that big of an upset, but Miles Colvin with two clutch buckets. Um, he did not. There have been a couple games this year where Miles Colvin has not played very well, but then this game he really showed up in the clutch. He had the game tying and game winning field goal at the end of the game to win by two, and Ole Miss's attempt at half court shot ended up falling short. So Purdue ended up winning that tournament, and I'm saying Purdue still is the favorite to win the Big Ten regular season. But if it ends up being a team like Wisconsin or even Oregon at this point, or Illinois, or Rutgers, and maybe Indiana, but eh, I'm hesitant on saying that. So just wanted to touch up on that really quickly. So before we switched over to a little women's hoops news, Notre Dame, after going on the road and losing, or not losing, but beating rather, USC, upsetting USC, they end up falling twice to TCU and Utah. So that was really strange to see. I mean, TCU, no shame in losing to, obviously. I mean, but again, Hannah Hidalgo, Olivia Miles, eh, they, they've been playing really well. But then TCU, of course, you have the resurgence of Haley Van Lith with 21 points, Sedona Prince, the Oregon transfer, with 20 points and 20 rebounds. Madison Connor with 18. So TCU really just outplayed them in that one. And then in the Utah game, which was even more shocking, uh, four Utah players in double figures. Hidalgo was 16, but um, yeah, I don't know what it is, but Notre Dame after that USC win, I thought that they would definitely be more on track um to win games like this. Maybe not against TCU, but especially against Utah, and then that just wasn't the case. So that was very interesting to end up seeing, and then uh, Duke end up beating Oklahoma in the Bulldogs Classic 109 to 99 in overtime. That was fantastic. Reagan Richardson with 35 for Duke, potential ACC Player of the Year candidate, ends up uh, outlasting Peyton Verhulst with 29, Reagan Beers with 26. Just a fantastic game for Duke overall. And team last year who upset Ohio State in the round of 32 um, definitely has a shot to do a lot more this season. So with that being said, let's for my final topic of the day, let's go to the ACC-SEC challenge in both men's and women's basketball. Um, lot of interesting matchups. Formerly, there was the Big Ten ACC challenge and the Big 12 SEC challenge, but that is no more. And so now that that is done, we have, I believe, also we have the Big 12 Big East challenge. Is that correct? Big 12 Big East challenge. Oh no, it's called the Big East Big 12 battle. Ooh, so different. So, um, man, I miss the big. Even though Indiana was like almost never good in that, I still kind of miss miss it at the same time. Is that messed up for me to say? Even though Indiana wasn't that good, like I still miss watching it. I don't know, maybe just me. So, um, come on. Oh yeah, so it has been played annually since 2019. Um, the Big East Big 12 battle at least. But let's get right into the men's one, and then I'll get to the women's. We have Georgia and Notre Dame. Georgia with Mike White has been playing very well recently. As I said, they beat St. John's in the Bahamas, and um, then I mean Notre Dame they did have a rough patch in there. So they've lost four in a row. Um, Definitely gonna pick Georgia there. Boston College, South Carolina, California, Missouri. Uh, Probably California. Yeah, Missouri. Well, I could see Missouri winning. Um, it is at Missouri, so actually Missouri. Um, Miami, Florida. If there was like a fourth place loser for tournaments, I would pick Miami. Arkansas probably won't win that one, even though it's at Miami. Syracuse, Tennessee. Tennessee. That's pretty easy to pick because I don't think Syracuse is all that good. And Tennessee is a potential Final Four dark horse. Texas A&M, Wake Forest, A&M because it's at A&M, Florida State, LSU, and especially because it's at LSU, Georgia Tech, Oklahoma. I mean, Oklahoma's got to keep up that momentum from the Battle for Atlantis win, so I will say Oklahoma for that one. Louisville, Ole Miss. I know Ole Miss just lost to um, Purdue, but I think they'll put up a pretty good fight against Louisville, even though it's at Louisville. I will say the Cardinals will win that one. Kentucky, Clemson. I mean, come on. Even though it's at Clemson, I got to go with Kentucky. They just look so much better. That is tomorrow, December 3rd. And then for December 4th, we have North Carolina, Alabama in one of the best games of the ACC-SEC Challenge. It's at North Carolina. I'm going to say North Carolina wins this one. Virginia, Florida. I mean, the last couple times that Virginia has played Florida, especially in the NCAA tournament, they have put up fewer than 50 points in both of those games. So that's easy, Florida. And then Duke and Auburn, best game of the challenge on the men's side. Um, Jeez. The thing is with Duke, I want to pick Duke really badly, but at the same time, it's a matter of if John Shire like goes away from that Cooper flag spin move that has not worked twice now against both Kentucky and Kansas. I believe they should be going away from that a little bit more, but at the same time, Cooper Flag is their best player, so it is a bit of a risky move to do that. Um, uh, I'm gonna go with Auburn. I think just Auburn's the better team, but again, I could see Duke easily winning this. I really don't care who wins, but if I had to pick, I'll pick Auburn. NC State and Texas. NC State. Just because it's at NC State, and then Pittsburgh, Mississippi State. Mississippi State. I was about to say Pittsburgh, but I just it's hard for me to go against Mississippi State right now. And then Virginia Tech, Vanderbilt. I have Vanderbilt, especially because Mark Byington has this team playing pretty well. I know they lost to Drake by 19, but Drake is not a slouch of a team. They are 7-0, so um, not nothing to scoff at there. So that's who I have for my picks there. And then for the women's side, we have Louisville, Oklahoma. I have Oklahoma, Miami, Florida, Vanderbilt, Virginia Tech, Georgia, Syracuse, Texas A&M. Oh, no, that's really not that good of a game because both teams are like 4-4, aren't they? Yeah, I have uh, A&M, sure. And then Florida State, Tennessee, Georgia Tech, Mississippi State. Um, Mississippi State, I mean, Sam Purcell's doing a really good job there. Um, but again, Georgia Tech, I mean, two undefeated teams. Um, God, this is such a better game than Syracuse A&M. I'm gonna go Mississippi State, going on the road and beating them. I just think Mississippi State, just the few times I've seen them play this year, they look pretty good. So, North Carolina, Kentucky. Oh, oh man. Um, because Kentucky's been playing really well. First year head coach Kenny Brooks. You have Georgia Amore, the Virginia Tech transfer, followed him to Kentucky. And oh man, that is a really tough call because North Carolina is one of the best defensive teams in the country. They held Indiana to 39 points. They've held quite a few opponents to under 50 this year. Even though they lost to Connecticut, they still gave them a good game. I'm going to go with North Carolina. That's my reasoning there. Um, Virginia, Auburn. Um, can't really say I know too much about either team, but I'll go with Virginia just because it's at home. Notre Dame, Texas. Oh man. Oh man. Because look, Notre Dame has already proven they can go on the road and beat a team like USC, but with the way they've been playing the last couple games, I just don't see them beating Texas. But again, they could. That's the thing. So, and again, Texas is so good. They're a Final Four sleeper, not a sleeper, but like like in terms of like a lot of the powerhouses that people are talking about, like South Carolina and UConn and USC, UCLA, Notre Dame. It, I got Texas. Uh, NC State, Ole Miss. I have Ole Miss. Um, Even though NC State's pretty good, but like, eh, Ole Miss just looks better to me. Arkansas and Boston College. Good Lord, what a snoozer of a game. Boston College. They look a little bit better from what I've seen. Clemson, Florida. Clemson. They just Florida has looked pretty bad so far, so I don't really want to pick them. California, Alabama. Alabama's actually pretty good this year. Duke, South Carolina. game of the ACC-SEC challenge on the women's side. Both end up involving Duke. And in both cases, I am going to pick against Duke. I'm going to pick South Carolina, especially if Malaysia Fulwiley ends up playing in that one. I mean, she should, but like again, we've seen Don Staley take her out against UCLA, so hopefully that beef, whatever it was, or if it just was like a non-story, just I hopefully whatever that was just ends up not being the case. SMU, Missouri, I guess Missouri, um, and then Stanford, LSU, LSU. I mean, I just don't think they're losing at home in this case. So anyway, those are my predictions for both the men's and women's ACC SEC challenge, and then with the final um, predictions, I will go with the Big East Big 12 battle. So let's start with Villanova Cincinnati. I believe Eric Dixon will score 42 points and Villanova will lose 104 to 93. So again, as I've said before, Eric Dixon is the Shohei Ohtani, the tungsten armored oil of college basketball this season. And I just think Cincinnati will win, even though it's at Villanova. Providence, BYU. Kevin Young's has got BYU off to a pretty solid start, and then Providence, they had a pretty bad battle for Atlantis, but don't think they had a ton of predictions or projections for that. I have Providence just because it's at Providence. So UConn and Baylor, even though I definitely want to pick Baylor beating UConn, I just can't really pick against UConn, even though they did just lose 3 games in the Maui. I just think this is going to be a bounce back, especially because it's at UConn. I just don't think they're losing at home. Creighton and Kansas. Creighton, geez, what has happened to you all, man? You're losing to San Diego State, Texas A&M, and I was, picking Ryan Kalkbrenner as the Big East Player of the Year, and that was very premature because God, this Creighton team is really bad to watch. So even though I definitely want to pick Creighton, I'm picking Kansas, even though I could easily see Creighton having a bounce back game, but at the same time, I just don't see it. Marquette and Iowa State, that is going to be a fantastic game to watch, and I am so angry it is on ESPN Plus. Why? Why is it on ESPN Plus? They better flex it out of that because why? I'm just, yeah. So I have Iowa State winning. Even though Marquette is a really, really good basketball team, I just don't see them going on the road and pulling off the upset at Hilton Coliseum. DePaul, Texas Tech. I actually have DePaul winning this game because they are 7-0, and I just want to see DePaul be good for once. I got to root for my guy CJ Gunn, former Indiana player, transferred, and I know DePaul's schedule has not been very good so far, but I just want to see it happen. I just want to see it happen. Um, Grant McCasland in his second season at Texas Tech. Uh, I just want to see DePaul win. Texas Tech will probably win, but whatever. um, and then Xavier TCU. Um, TCU's not that good this year, I don't think. Xavier, I predicted South Carolina would beat Xavier. That was false, but Michigan ended up beating them. I'm going to pick Xavier. Um, Georgetown, West Virginia, West Virginia. They played pretty. They upset Gonzaga already. They played Louisville pretty well. And Georgetown is Georgetown, and any opportunity to root against Ed Cooley is a good thing. So, uh, West Virginia. Uh, Butler, Houston. That doesn't even. I mean, Houston's just a lot better than a Butler squad, who, granted, has played pretty well as of late, knocking off Mississippi State especially. Um, but they're not going on the road at Houston and winning. Like if they do, that'd be pretty cool. But I just don't see Houston losing that one. Um, St. John's, speaking of Lou Carnesecca, is going to be facing Kansas State. I think St. John's will win this one in honor of Lou, and I just think they're a better team than Kansas State. And then Seton Hall, Oklahoma State, I guess, um, because Seton Hall lost again to another team without scoring over 60 points. They lost to Monmouth, uh, 51-63. Um, Seton Hall is just not a good basketball team. And um, good lord. So yeah, those are my predictions for that. Even though I don't even think Oklahoma State's that good, but they're at least better so far than Seton Hall. So those are my predictions for the Big East Big 12 battle. I want to make sure I have that correct. Um, and I believe that about does it. So no, we had a lot to talk about. So apologies. Oh my gosh. Um, if you all liked what you heard and you want to hear more from it, consider telling us about it. Tell your friends. Do whatever, you know. I would appreciate the exposure. And then if you all, again, if you are watching on Spotify or Apple, consider subscribing, consider giving the show 5 stars. And if you're watching on YouTube, again, like the video, leave a comment, and yeah, consider subscribing as well. You can also email the pod at crimsonmiserypod@gmail.com. And with that being said, I believe that is it. So, should see you all Wednesday, maybe either Wednesday or Thursday, and we'll break down some action this week. And with that being said, hope you all have a good rest of the week. Happy December. Christmas is only 23 days away, so if you celebrate that, you know, you got something to look forward to, hopefully. Uh, but anywho, thanks again so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching if you're on YouTube, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.